But, I want to throw a sidebar in, Grant, if I can.
Sure.
When we have our event in June, there were 238 people who were killed, and I hope the people don't get tired of hearing that number, our fine listeners today. But we have had a committee working since November, and we found family members from 225 of the 238. And we've invited them to these commemoration festivities, or not festivities, but ceremonies and convocations to be held in Rapid City on June 8th, 9th, and 10th. And we have at least 100 who have now said they're coming, 100 families. And we think that we'll have several hundred of their descendants and their family members that will attend and be recognized. This is not a maudlin, sad experience that we will have this June, but we want to pay tribute to those people who perished. And then we also want to commemorate the vitality and the caliber of the people and the fiber in their spine who have led Rapid City to be such a fine community now. It's one of the most progressive and beautiful cities on the Great Plains, and we moved all of those people away from the creek as part of our recovery. And now that floodplain, when we still have floods and we still have high water, and we will have floods for the next 1,000 years there in Rapid City for sure, but now there's nobody living on the banks of the creek, and we made it a requirement that over 1,500 of those families would move away, and then they would move into new subdivisions that were not near the creek, and we moved 180 businesses too. And also, now that land is parkland, and it's about 6 miles long and about 5 or 6 blocks wide. And it's a beautiful recreational and park-like avenue all the way through the community, and that leads to a quality of life. And I never drive across that floodplain or drive near the creek or go fishing down below M Hill when I don't think about those 238 that perished. That was a terrible price to pay for finally getting our zoning correct. We never should have allowed homes and businesses to build on that floodplain, but that's all hindsight, and we didn't use much foresight in those years. But now the Rapid City floodplain is a safe place to visit, and we don't let people sleep there anymore, and we've been a safe city now for 40 years.
Don, as you think back on that night, because there, and you talk about the number of the descendants will be back, do you still, Don, do you still wake up once in a while at night and relive that in your mind? Because what a horrible night. Here, you're the guy really not responsible for the flood, but you're a very responsible person. You got to give commands and make snap decisions and order people here and talk with people that have lost loved ones, and your fire department losing people. Do you still have nightmares about that once in a while, Don?
Well, I still think about it a lot, Grant, and you kind of hit it on the nail there. I mean, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I went to South Dakota State there, but I did not take ROTC. But I was fortunate in my academic career, and I was awarded a direct commission in the Army. And I served in Vietnam at a large hospital where we saw the gruesome side of battle. That was for sure. We had 400 beds in our hospital, and I think about those things a little more often than I do the flood. But I will tell you, I do think about the flood, because about 3 in the morning, I had a police radio in my car, and there was a policeman near a fire truck, and the assistant fire chief called me, and he says, "Don, in all likelihood, Mr. Mayor," he said, "we've lost the lives of 3 firemen. We can't find them. They were swept into Canyon Lake." And I was just terrified about that all night long. And then the next morning the chief found me and told me, and I just broke down in tears. And then we lost a policeman, and I began to hear from General Corning, who was a wonderful World War II veteran and the commander of the National Guard, that he had lost men, and they thought they'd lost a lot more. But those people were found by 10 or 11 in the morning, and they were just down in the creek working to save people all night long, and had lost their commanders and their supervisors. But they worked as heroes all night long. You betcha, Grant, I think about it a lot. I'm still a young man. I'm 69 years old, and I've had a wonderful family and a wonderful life, but those scars are with us for a long, long time. But I also remember, Grant, and I don't mean to hog the spotlight here, but You would not believe the hearts and the generosity of the people of South Dakota, Mr. Peterson. It just brings tears to your eyes. The next morning, the Homestake Mining vice president up at Lead, he met me at the courthouse. He handed me a check for $10,000, and he said, make sure that you give this to the flood victims. And so about a week later, we formed the Rapid City Disaster Foundation. And people from all over South Dakota, every town and every county sent money. People from all over America, every state, and volunteers in 16 foreign countries, they sent donations. Within the next 10 months, we gave away $1,400,000. Our entire expense money was to pay the phone bill for our little office. And about 103% of that money, because we invested in the bank right away, was given in cash to the flood victims. And those monies really helped those people. Some of those people had lost everything. They didn't have 15 cents in their pocket for a toothbrush. And we were able to get them some walk-around money within about 2 weeks. And then we passed it out in phases, and that came from the generosity of the people of South Dakota. A lot of us remember Mike Shermer, who was a great mayor of Sioux Falls, and he built the arena there in Sioux Falls. Mike called me, and he said, would I be in my office at 10 the next morning? And I said, sure. He said, well, have the coffee ready. And I said, well, Mike, come on out. And he came out, and he handed me a check for $93,000. Wow. The kids in Sioux Falls had gone door to door in coffee cans and glass jars and raised $93,000 for us. And I was in tears, and the city council was too, and we thanked boldly the citizens of Sioux Falls for their generosity. Gip Nolan was a friend of mine, the manager there, the city manager and a fine man, and the chamber manager in Brookings. He led a fund drive in Brookings, and they sent us about $20,000, and Gip was an old friend of mine. I'd known him when I was a jackrabbit there in Brookings, and it was the generosity of the good hearts in South Dakota that made that recovery possible.
I suppose, Don, you know, when, as you say, when we drive through Rapid City today, we remember the old Rapid City and the creek and what have you. And still, I never, ever take Highway 44, go west of Rapid City, where I don't remember the homes with the X's and a chunk of the highway laying off on one side of the old highway or the new highway, and such a moving time. And yet to this day, if I go out there and I drive out 44, I still vision the X's and the what having on those homes. And but now today, like you say, with the new Canyon Lake Park and all the way down Jackson Boulevard, and you know, that green area all the way down to out to Rapid Valley, you know, it's a beautiful area now with a gorgeous bike path. But still, I still remember, and it was a fall before I got out there, but I still I never go through there. And that's why I wonder what, even when you go back, you've got to have things that pop in your mind that you think, that's
yes,
tough to remember.
And Grant, there was one lady, and she was about 16 or 17, and her father and her mother and her brother were at the neighbor's house, and they got swept into the creek and were killed in the very first moments. And then the water got to her house, and she tried to hold on with her brother, but her brother died, and she got swept about a quarter of a mile down the creek, and she got swept into somebody's garage, and she crawled out of the garage and got up in the attic, and she shivered and was cold all night, but she was able to survive. And now, of course, those townhouses are totally taken out of there. They were out of the county, but I remember those X's all over those buildings. That meant that the National Guard and the search parties had gone through that rubble and had collected all the bodies they could find. We were finding bodies until August of that summer. And, you know, it's just amazing. There's another group of people we intend to honor in June. And I know this sounds terribly maudlin, but the South Dakota Professional Morticians Association, they sent 40 of their volunteers and 40 professionals to Rapid City to process the bodies for over 200 people. And it was so bad, Bernie, it was so bad, the funeral homes got together and they said, well, we'll only schedule one funeral per hour. And they did that for about 7 weeks.
Unbelievable.
And that's a morbid calculation there, to think that we had to open up the ground at the cemeteries, and You know, the headline in the Rapid City Journal said it's kind of like war, isn't it? And boy, I tell you, I've seen war and I've seen floods, and there's not just a great big difference, I'll tell you.
And the nightmare didn't stop when the water went down, did it? I know even being from East River, I was in college, and I remember from East River, people who had friends or relatives out there couldn't reach them by phone because the phone lines were all down, and of course we didn't have cell phones then. So there was all this unknowing, and of course unknowing is a terrible thing for if you had family members out there. All this not knowing who survived and who died, and in so many ways it just continued and continued for days and for weeks, didn't it?